being such a New Englander. It's like plus or minus 15 minutes. But, yeah. Anyways.
So, we are ready to go.
All right, call to order. Today we have a guest, so I'm gonna come back to the agenda in a minute.
Just roll call first.
But we'll do roll call first.
Then we can move.
And then we'll move directly to
our presentation. Yes.
Yeah. Just item 7B on our new business. But okay.
Commissioner Olson?
Here.
Commissioner Johnson?
Here.
Commissioner Caraway Waterhouse?
Present.
Commissioner Winburn?
Here. Awesome, and to our new business, so a request from our commissioner and also an invitation, so thank you to Robin for inviting our guest today, who's from the trustees, and will tell us about how the trustees of reservations approach of management is to a new forest pathogen, relatively new beech leaf disease. So I'll give it away to you. And
Thank you very much. Is that working okay? Can you tell?
if you have the green light on.
I've got a green light.
Yeah,
Got a
you're
green
good.
light. Great. Well, I want to thank Robin for inviting me and for all of you for letting me participate and share with you the challenge that we're facing with beech leaf disease across the trustees of reservations property. My name is Joanne Vieira, and I'm the Director of Horticulture and Public Gardens for the trustees. Robin and I work together across 12 of the trustees' public garden properties. And I'll tell you a little bit about the trustees so that you kind of understand the context of where I'm coming from as we're struggling with this problem that I know many of you are familiar with. Let's see if I can advance. There we go. There we go. So the Trustees of Reservations is Massachusetts, it's actually the country's oldest and Massachusetts' largest conservation and preservation organization, nonprofit organization. And we've been around since 1891. We are really honored to have this longevity in the state of Massachusetts, preserving really important ecologic, historic, and scenic land for everyone forever, and that's our commitment to people. And we're doubling down our efforts to expand the land holdings that we have because we view this land as not only restorative for people, but really a positive and joyful way to help restore the planet. So it's a really important mission, and Robin and I are both really honored to be part of this organization. Together with partners across the state, we protect more than 52,000 acres. Over 30,000 of that is open to the public, so it's open for people to visit at any hours that the reservations are open. We also combine with private landowners to preserve, under conservation restrictions, over 20,800 additional acres. So it's a huge chunk of land that we feel responsible for and that we open to the public to preserve these spaces. We have over 120 properties. We don't even try to count the number anymore because we're rapidly adding properties, and it's our goal with our new strategic plan to continue to double down on the effort to preserve more and more acreage in Massachusetts. So we're continually expanding the acreage. I think when I came on board, we said 119 properties, and then it very quickly went up to 122, 123, but we're losing count. So we do know our number of acres under preservation are brand new numbers for us. We just did a little recalculation. Our land con team just did a little recalculation of that. We actually host on these properties over 1.8 million visitors every year. So it's a great way to reach people and to teach people. So when we're presented with a problem like beech leaf disease, not only are we working really hard to preserve the trees under our care, but working hard to share this information with others as well. And amongst all of these wonderful properties, there are campgrounds, there are inns and beds and breakfasts, there are cross-country ski areas, there are art museums, and we're very happy that there are 12 public gardens in this mix because that's really where Robin and I devote our time. We do have 85,000 household members, so that's, when you add up the number of people in those households, it's a lot of support for the work that we do. So we do take seriously this work and our need to share information. So again, thank you very much for allowing us to share what we're doing. I put up this map because it shows both the 120 plus properties across the state, but it really calls out those 12 public garden properties that are located everywhere from down on Martha's Vineyard, where we have a little Japanese stroll garden, all the way out to the opposite end of the state in the Berkshires. Namkeg is one of our finer and better known public garden properties. And the fact that these properties are spread all across the state in 3 different climate zones, in different soil conditions, different soil types, different hydrologies, different pH ranges, really gives us an opportunity to really capture some data and experiment a little bit with treatments for problems like beech leaf disease, but also trialing plants to share information with people. So it's a really unique opportunity and really something we're really excited about. Got to keep my mouse on that arrow there. There we go. So let me jump in and talk a little bit about beech leaf disease. I'm sure that you all know a bit about this problem. It's a rising problem. It was first discovered in Ohio in 2012. And at that point, it wasn't clear what it was. People in Ohio were seeing malformed leaves on beech trees, on the native populations of beech trees. They were beginning to see leaf drop. They were seeing it spread. It looked like some kind of a disease or virus, but it wasn't really clear what it was. But they gave it the name beech leaf disease before they really knew that it actually was an organism, a nematode within the leaves. So it's really not quite a disease, but that name has really stuck. And it wasn't until 8 years later that the nematode was actually discovered and identified. And it is a subspecies of an Asian nematode, which occurs in the Asian species of beech trees, but is not a problem there. It is, of course, a problem here, and this subspecies is a little bit distinct. There's still a lot to learn about this nematode, only having been really discovered or identified in 2020. We now only have 6 years of trying to figure out really how it acts, what its life cycle is like, and trying to strategize ways to help bring it under control. So the information that I share with you tonight represents where we are in that knowledge trajectory now, but I am sure in the next 2, 3, 5, 10 years, that science will change, and we'll look back on what we're talking about today and say, oh boy, did we not know a thing, because it's changing pretty rapidly. This nematode, again, spends most of its life inside the leaves or inside the buds of the trees, and it's really during the winter months that it's doing the damage that later we see in the leaves as they emerge and unfurl in the spring. So really all the damage, it's thought that all of the damage that we see in those leaves is done over the winter. So once the trees leaf out, there's nothing you can do to improve those leaves. There are some things that you can do to try to reduce the nematode populations and to boost the health of the trees, to give them a fighting chance to overcome this problem. And mostly those treatments that are available now are for single specimen trees. They are not to address the trees that are so critical in our forests. Those, we simply don't have the technology yet to help fight those problems. It quickly spread from 2012 in Ohio, mostly eastward, and I'll show you a map of how the disease or the nematode has moved, but it's now in 15 states, including up into Canada, so it's really spread pretty quickly. And it's impacting not only our native beech, which is a huge problem for us, but also all of the European beech that are so common in designed landscapes, and the oriental beech that are in design landscapes as well, which are much less common. It is interesting to me that the nematode DNA can actually be found in oaks and maples, but we're not seeing any evidence of damage in them yet. But interestingly, the DNA can actually be found on beech trees before the symptoms are visible. So what that means for the future of where this nematode moves, who knows? But fortunately, so far, there's no sign that it's going to damage those other trees. But as I said before, there's still a lot to be learned, and I think time will prove very interesting. So here's the map of where the disease has spread. You can see if you look at my cursor here, this is Ohio, where it started. Actually, that very small, very pale green sliver in northern Ohio. And then the next year, it moved out into the lighter green, then into those blue zones, and then very quickly moved all the way east and a little bit west, but mostly an eastward spread. And the yellow areas are where we're seeing it now, or where we were seeing it last year in 2025. No doubt, we'll see that it's expanded even more in this spring when trees leaf out again. Again, there's a lot that we don't know. We don't completely know how it spreads, but it does jump big geographical regions, and it is found in isolated pockets in the middle of woodlands where it's unlikely that humans have brought it, and it's unlikely that it just, moved on a mammal, but very possible that it moved on a bird or that it moved on some insect, so, flying into that forest. So there is some evidence that it certainly does, the nematode itself on the trees moves in the film of rainwater, so there's some mobility there. And it might be that it's moving on rain splash and raindrops and moving on winds in, storm clouds. So that is a definite possibility. Humans undoubtedly are spreading it some, but I don't think that's the biggest problem. And again, as you saw on that map, most of the spread is from west to east, so that kind of lends us to think that somehow the winds that are moving in that direction are having an impact as well, and that could be carrying, gypsy moths or carrying spiders, on their webs for long distances. So here's what it looks like. How do you know if your tree has it? And the telltale signs are, and I'm sorry, Robin, I'll scoot back a little bit. The telltale signs are those dark bands that you see in between the veins of the leaves. And it's really more evident on our American beech. The leaves of the American beech tree, when they come out in the spring, are very light. They feel very lightweight, as opposed to the European beech, which has a slightly more leathery leaf. And the pale color of our native beech means that when you hold it up to the light, it's sort of translucent. And so you really can see the striping pretty clearly on our native beech tree. It gets a little more difficult with European beech, and I'll show you some pictures of that in a minute. The other way that we know for sure when we're seeing a problem that we aren't certain of is we'll send a tissue sample into the UMass laboratory, and they'll, for $50, they'll test it, and they can very quickly put that segment of a leaf in a petri dish and look under the microscope, and they'll see nematodes fleeing that leaf surface like by the thousands. So it's pretty evident to them under a microscope. As I said, that nematode can be detected, the DNA of the nematode can be detected in trees before we can even see the signs. So if you suspect or you're very concerned about a specimen tree, you know that the disease is around you and you want to move to protect that tree, you can get ahead of it and send in some samples in advance and see if it actually exists in that tree before symptoms exist. And then interestingly, it's recently been discovered that if you capture the rainwater that runs down the trunk, which is called the stem flow, the DNA actually persists in there if the disease is flowing down on that rainwater through the nematode DNA is flowing down on that rainwater down the stem from an infestation that can't be seen at the top of the canopy. So again, another way that the arborists and scientists can really get ahead of this problem, or try to at least be aware of where it's located. So here is a tiny grove of American beech, and this is the picture in the center is what happens if you cut an American beech tree down. It very often suckers rapidly from a shallow root system and creates these colonies. And that, in fact, is what happens in woodlands. Even without the cutting of the mother tree, our native beech suckers quite a lot and forms these impenetrable colonies in some cases. This happens to be one that's on one of our properties down in Northeaston, the Governor Oliver Ames estate. And there was an old beech tree there. We can see the remnants of the big old stump there, and this thicket had sprung up over the years. And we began to notice a couple of years ago the striations that you see in that left-hand photo that shows late in the season what's happening to that tissue that was a dark green band earlier in the season, now starts to go over, the tissue starts to die off, it's turning yellow here. And eventually the thicket began to lose a lot of leaves. 2 or 3 years into the infestation, the photograph on the right is what we see with the emerging leaves. They are very leathery. They don't look at all like the healthy leaves that would have emerged a few years before the infestation. They're tough, they're leathery, they're smaller, they're malformed. The cellular structure of those leaves has been modified, and their photosynthetic ability has been reduced by 61% or more. So they're hanging on, but you can see that there are very fewer leaves as the infestation persists, and the tree and this thicket is beginning to decline overall. So this year we saw very little growth on any of the new branches on that tree, on that thicket. And then here's what the European beech trees' leaves look like. They're less toothed along the edges. They tend to be more leathery. The middle photograph is from a copper beech, which is what's been used ornamentally in grand landscapes and gardens for decades. And in fact, some of our trees are 100 years old or more. And those trees, on those leaves where they're dark and leathery, the infestation is much more difficult to really detect. And we've been watching these trees for a number of years, and we're seeing on some of them, when the leaves emerge in the spring and they're this very dark color, unless they're heavily infested, this leaf is clearly heavily infested. You can see the ribbing, you can see the malforms and formation in the leaves. They normally would look like this, very smooth, glossy, whereas this one is much more corrugated because of the infestation. But in a leaf like this one, and this is what we're seeing commonly when the infestations are light, there's just a little bit of puckering there. You almost don't even notice it, and you could mistake it for something else. On some trees, all we see is this tattering. We never actually see the clear striations or striping that we see on the American beech, or that we see clearly in this picture. And this is a green, actually, I'm sorry, I take that back. This is a copper beech with the red leaves, but later in the season. It loses that burgundy pigment later in the season, so it becomes a little bit easier to see the infestation. And then here's a few more examples. These are all European beech leaves. A straight green species of Fagus sylvatica on the left, where the striations, that was a pretty heavily infested tree. The striations are pretty clear on that one. In the center, and this is kind of interesting to me, this is the new growth on a seedling tree that is amongst a grove of very heavily infested copper beech. And this is at the Ames estate. And this seedling tree, in the middle of the summer this year, had new growth that was showing the signs, and you can see it here. And that's the opposite of what we were led to expect to see. And so that's why we're seeing things that are not consistent with our expectations, because what we know and the progression of the disease continues to evolve. So here, in brand new growth, which had, wasn't from the buds that were formed last year, it wasn't from the infestation of nematodes that overwintered, this was a brand new segment of a branch with brand new leaves that were formed this season. So that's a little unusual. And then on the right-hand side, this is a fern leaf or a splenifolia beech. And I just wanted to point out here, if you can really take a quick look at that, you can see sort of how the cellular structure is altered there. It looks different. It's a little more translucent. The cells seem to be larger in that section, and they are darker. So that's indicating to us a very new and lighter infestation in that particular tree. And that's one that's on a property that has only some slight hints of infestation. So we're really curious to see what that tree and the others nearby look like in the coming year, to see if the techniques that we're using are helpful at all. So what's the problem with this nematode? What is it really doing? As I said before, it's overwintering in the buds. It's supposedly doing all of its damage in those buds to the newly forming leaves. So it's eating that tissue from the fall over into the winter. And then as those leaves emerge in the spring, they're showing the damage from the damage that happened while they were eating in the buds. And as the summer progresses, within those leaves, the populations continue to reproduce and build. And then eventually, mid to late summer, and again, the timing isn't black and white on this, but they begin to move out of the leaves towards the new buds, to settle into the buds that are forming in the mid to late summer so that they can overwinter. So they're moving into the buds. That's a moment when they're vulnerable. that's a time when we want to try to control them before they get into those buds and do the damage that will affect those leaves in the coming year. We also want to try to hit those nematodes while the populations are low. So before they start doing their wild dance and their frenzied reproduction dances in the middle of the summer, if we can try to keep those populations down, then those buds will fare a better chance over the winter months. The feeding that they do in those buds actually causes cellular changes within the leaf that affects, as I said, the ability of those leaves to photosynthesize, reducing their ability by up to 60 or 61%. It also increases respiration, so they're losing moisture. They're losing moisture faster than they're taking it in. And then, of course, badly infected leaves drop prematurely. Sometimes trees have enough energy to send out a new flush of leaves. The new flush of leaves should not be damaged by the nematodes because they would not have been in those buds, so they would not have had a chance to affect those new young leaves. But those new leaves generally are lighter in texture. They're undersized often, and they simply they can't compensate. They're not numerous enough, large enough, or vital enough to really do the work of that first set of leaves. So the tree is expending more energy than it's taking back in. And so year after year of this, and particularly as the populations of the nematodes build, the trees get weaker and weaker. And what they've seen in Ohio is that within 2 to 6 and sometimes 10 years, many trees succumb to this issue. So the hope is that we'll be able to identify trees that show some resistance so that we can start to work with new generations of trees that will have an ability to overcome this in a longer life. But what we're seeing in New England so far is that trees are succumbing, especially our natives and especially the younger ones, are succumbing even more quickly than they were in Ohio. And that is due to a variety of factors. The conditions here are different from Ohio, drought stress, and the other factors of the changing climate are affecting them as well and causing them, we think, to succumb more quickly. So all the more urgency for us to try to find a solution to this. And we know that this is really an important species. I know this text is pretty small, so you don't have to read it all, but our native beech tree is a really foundational tree species in the eastern forest. It makes up about 10% of all of the trees in the state of Massachusetts in our forest, so very important. And it's a great source of food for a lot of mammals, certainly a lot of birds. Squirrels, chipmunks, bears, deer, turkeys, all love to feed on this plant. And there's a whole host of insects and caterpillars that also feed on this plant. So it is not as big of a resource as oak trees are, but a very, very important resource. It also is an indicator of a climax or a mature forest. So it's very difficult to replace these trees in that particular environment. And because they form this thicket and because they create a leaf litter that is very dense, leaves don't break down very quickly on the ground plane, there's not a lot of regenerative growth of other plants coming up underneath them where they occur in our forests. So when we lose them, it opens a big hole in the forest. And we don't know what's going to come back into that hole, but certainly if it's in an area where there are invasive species nearby, they might very well take the opportunity to move into that gap in the forest. The other thing that happens is that while where there is beech leaf disease and the nematodes in the leaves decompose more quickly. So that actually changes the forest floor, and it changes the composition of the fungi and the other parasites on the forest floor. And what the results of that in the long run will be, we don't really know yet. But it is certainly of concern, especially in climax forests where the equilibrium is pretty delicate. So not a tree that we want to lose, of course. And then, of course, as we lose these trees, and there is a gap, that's fewer trees taking carbon out of the air. And as the leaves decompose on the forest floor, that's less carbon also that are held in those reserves. So in terms of climate change, not helpful. So can it be treated? There's a lot of research going on out there. The research teams at all of the universities in the Northeast are working on this. All of the arborist companies are doing everything they can to come up with a solution for this. There are a couple of chemicals that are being used out there, and I'll talk very briefly about those. I'm not trying to promote those chemicals in any way, shape, or form. At the trustees, we try to be as organic as we possibly can be. So we don't turn to chemicals as the first measure, and we sometimes don't even turn to it as a last measure if we don't feel completely comfortable, and that's the situation that we're in right now. The chemicals that are being used right now, fluopyram or broad form, is one of the chemicals that are being applied now as a foliar spray, and it's a spray that needs to be done by a certified arborist, so it's not something that homeowners can do. The last one on the list here, the Arbitect 20 injections, also need to be done by a certified arborist. So again, not something that's really useful to homeowners, but I'll talk a little bit more in depth about the applications of those and what we see as the concerns for us. The phosphite soil drenches and the phosphite bark sprays are things that people can do at home, and there are other things that you can do really just to really help keep trees healthy, and that's where we're focusing our energies. So I'll talk very quickly about these chemicals. I will say that we're not using them ourselves, although we did try some of them, and our experience with them was not great. In our public garden properties across the state, we employ arborists in each region. So we're working with many different arborists across all of these properties. And our approach to maintaining or to dealing with this issue was not uniform across those properties. And so on one property, one of our arborists jumped in and said, look, we've got this chemical. We know this tree is important to you and we really want to use this chemical. And so they went ahead, they got the permission of the property manager and went ahead and used this broad form spray. And, you know, we were okay with that initially. It was a good recommendation. It was something that we knew was experimental. But the more we looked into it, the more concerns we had about its use on many of our properties, because it is something that's highly toxic to aquatic invertebrates. And many of our properties, including the one that we were initially trialing this on, have gardens around them. They have homes, historic homes. We have lots of visitors. We have water features. We have ponds nearby. We have hard surface roads that have storm drains that could then transport this material elsewhere. And so we became quite concerned about that and put a hold on using that material, although it is one of the ones that's being used really as a stopgap measure, particularly for important specimens where it's safe to be used. So others are definitely using this material. The challenges we see with this are, aside from the hazards for aquatic invertebrates, is that in order for it to be effective, you have to completely drench the foliage. And in order to do that on a 100-year-old, 80 or 90 foot tall specimen, you've got a fire hose out there that's, you know, using high pressure to spray that material. And there's usually a lot of overspray with that, and that's very concerning to us. So in the situations that I mentioned already on our garden spaces, it just didn't feel like the right thing for us to do. The timing is very important, and the timing is, again, a moving target. The arborists who are using this are learning more about what the appropriate timing is. The best time to really try to control the nematodes, as I said earlier, is really before their populations ramp up. So early in the spring, you know, June into July is a good time for that spray. But there also is some evidence that suggests that later in the season is also helpful. So again, I think there's a lot that we need to learn about how best to use that material if we choose to use it. It apparently is not likely to kill the eggs, so it's really only working on the nematodes when they are out and moving and vulnerable. It is sort of locally systemic, but it's not penetrating those leaves. So it's almost like a contact poison. So that's why the coverage of every leaf is really important, and it doesn't have any residual activity. So if you spray that on Tuesday, you know, by Friday, if a bird flies in with nematodes on it, it's not giving you any long-term protection. So again, really best suited for individual specimens where they're located away from other infested trees. And then we're seeing recent concerns about this chemical being highly persistent. And so, again, another reason that we have red flags going up about the use of this material. The other thing is that it's likely that the fungi that it's actually been used for develop resistant to it pretty quickly. So it's not certain whether nematodes will develop a resistance to it, but the way it's been licensed and registered, it has to be alternated with another material, and there's not another good material that has the same impact on the nematodes. So that alternating is a little bit tricky as well with another material. And again, it's not a cure. It is a stopgap measure. So this is not killing the nematode. It's not eradicating them. Those nematodes are now all around us. They're in the forest. If we're not treating those, they're going to continue to move around. So this is really just a stopgap, sort of a temporary measure to get people through and get trees through until something better comes along. It's also pretty expensive. Arbortech 20 is the other material that's applied by certified arborists. It is a systemic injection, and it's been used for many years to fight Dutch elm disease on elm trees, and it's been very successful. But elm trees are very different animals than old beech trees. They heal very quickly, they grow very quickly, they have a much thicker bark. So doing these injections in the bark of a very thin barked species that's also a very slow growing species has some concerns for us. We're not certain how well these trees are going to tolerate that and how quickly they'll heal. The good news is that if you do it, hopefully it gives you more than 1 year of protection, so it's not something that would have to be reapplied every single year. It does take time to move through trees, especially older trees, and it's not really effective on trees that are really losing their canopy already. So any tree that's lost more than 30% of its canopy is likely not a good candidate because it's not translocating that material very efficiently out to all of those buds, which is where the nematodes are. And again, this is not curative either. It's a stopgap measure. And this is what it looks like. That middle picture shows you the injection ports, the tube that, so a single tree, depending on its size, could have 40, 50, 60 holes in that tree. The arborists are trying very carefully to put the injection holes on the sides of the root flare, not on the top, so that it's not going to accumulate water. But you can see, and it's a little difficult, but in these images, you can see the holes here that are not healing that well after a season from the injections. And this was on a tree that we saw when we took a little trip this summer down to a garden in Delaware, Mount Cuba. And that particular tree had the injections, and the holes were weeping. And the injections had been done quite a long time ahead of our visit there. So that, to me, did not look like a good sign for that tree. There are many other diseases that affect the bark of beech trees, so adding insult to injury is of concern to us. We actually did try this on that, the tree that was originally getting the broad form sprays, which we halted. The next move was this. And so because that tree was heavily infested, we tried this treatment on it. And so we tried it in the summer of 2024, and in the spring of 2025, that tree and a second tree that we had tried in another part of the state both looked worse. So we walked away from that particular treatment. I do believe it was the timing of the treatment, which happened in mid to late summer and probably should have happened earlier in the season. So you really want to make sure that the timing of this product goes into the tree after the leaves are fully leafed out, but that's the time when they're really moving all their materials through and up and out into the canopy. So that's a really good time to get that material up, from what we understand now. And again, that might change in the future because all of this is really very new. So phosphite bark sprays are something that we've been doing for a number of our beech trees for several years. and we've been doing it not for beech leaf disease, but to fight Phytophthora, which is the bleeding canker disease of beech trees. And it's been very successful in treating that. And the phosphite actually accumulates in the plant. It's not metabolized by these trees, so it accumulates year over year. So we've been doing, on some trees, we've been doing sprays spring and fall, which we think is going to give these trees a little bit of a leg up, but it clearly is not enough. So those sprays have not kept the disease off those trees, and the trees that have been getting those sprays, while they look pretty good, they're not good enough to give us hope that bark sprays alone are going to be the solution. So we are doing, in combination with a bunch of other things, we're actually doing phosphite soil drenches. Polyphosphite 30 is a fertilizer that is widely available. It's available to homeowners as well. Getting the right application rates is really important with this. It's applied typically as a root flare drench, so right around the base of the tree, around the root where the trunk flares out to the roots, or within the root circle of that tree. And that's the direction that we've been going in. We've been doing a circle about 12 feet out from the trunk of the tree and applying this polyphosphite 30 soil drench. In Ohio, this has been really successful. They've seen really good results, and they've been fighting this the longest, so they're seeing really good results simply with these phosphite soil drenches. So that gives us really good hope. And we've just started these drenches this year, so we're really hoping to see some good results next year. We're trialing a few other things at the same time. It doesn't actually kill the nematodes. It actually helps the plant fight them off a little bit better. So it's turning on the defense system of the plant and helping it, beef up its leaf surface and beef up its ability to overcome these problems. One of the interesting things is that even if you're spraying this on the bark, it translocates both up to the leaves and down to the root system. And if you're doing a soil drench, it actually moves up through the tree, so it's bidirectional in its movement. If you were to do a foliar spray, which is not recommended because it can cause some phytotoxicity in leaves, but if you're doing a foliar spray, it actually would move into the plant. So it moves around pretty well in the plant. And as I said about the phosphite bark sprays, it's not metabolized. So applications year after year accumulate in the plant, giving it further protection. Do we know yet how much is too much? Not quite. So that's something that we'll continue to learn. But it is environmentally a very low impact fertilizer to be using, so we feel pretty good about that. We also know that it is accumulating, the phosphites are accumulating in the leaves. So it's another reason to leave the leaves. You're hearing that a lot about leaving the leaf litter. This is another good reason, if you're using these materials, to keep the leaves under the tree. Not only does it provide some mulch to mitigate temperature fluctuations and help to retain a little bit of moisture, but it's also returning more phosphites back into the soil and then back into the tree. All right, so those are all things that we're using for our specimens within the gardens and in our designed landscapes. None of those measures are useful on landscape scale or forest scale. So there's still a lot of work that needs to be done to find solutions for this and to plan for the future if we're not able to find solutions fast enough to save the trees that are there. So what we're asking people to do is to keep their eyes open. When they're in a forest where they're seeing beech leaf disease, look for that one tree that's not affected or that's little affected, that's faring better than the others. Look for the seedlings that look like they're not being overcome by this disease. And let someone in the Extension Service or in your Urban Forest Commission or at UMass know that you're seeing these trees that look like they have some hope for the future for us. That's really, really important. So I've told you a little bit about how we're facing this challenge and the things that we're not doing, talked a little bit about the soil drenches that we are doing that we have great hope for. We're also really digging into this problem around the state. We have untold number of beech trees across our properties, both native and many, many of the European beech trees. We have only one now, I think, of the oriental beech tree, which is an Asian species, which is now the one specimen that we have is in our, Robin might know if we have another one hiding somewhere on other public garden properties, because she manages all of the records for our plant collection. But this particular small one, which is on the lower left, the small tree second from the left, is a European species that we had hoped that, an Asian species that we had hoped would not be impacted, but is. So across all these properties, there are many European beech, there are many different cultivars of European beech, there are weeping forms, there are copper-leaved forms, there are copper weeping forms, there are straight species, tremendous variety. And so we're hoping that within that variety, we also see some resistance. And in fact, we do have hope for one European cultivar called Tortuosa, which we have on one of our properties at a property that Robin is working on now called Farinir, that has a sort of an odd kind of weeping form and a green leaf. I happen to have that particular cultivar on my own property, and the trees in the forest around my house have been decimated. There are very few leaves left on the beech trees this year, and yet that one specimen that sits right at the top of my driveway in a very difficult growing condition looks pretty doggone good. I see a little bit of tattering on a few leaves here and there, but otherwise, the canopy is not any lighter, it has had no loss of foliage, and it really looks pretty healthy. Will that be the case in 5 years? Who knows? But that's the kind of thing that we're looking for. So across all these properties, we're really carefully monitoring 81 of the many, many specimens that we have. And those 81 are the ones that we think are the most important and we know would be very difficult for us to try to replace, either because they're an enormous size, like this magnificent beech tree, which is the one that's had those treatments that I spoke about at our Long Hill Garden up in Beverly, or this monster beech at the Doyle Reservation in Leominster, which has a 74-inch diameter breast height. It's huge. It and the one at the Ames Estate down in Northeaston are the two biggest ones that we're monitoring right now in terms of diameter breast height. Both of those trees are experiencing decline related to growing conditions and age. But we are still prioritizing them because we'd hate to lose them after all this time, more than 100 years, to a disease that we might be able to provide a little bit of help to them for. So we're carefully monitoring those trees. And by monitoring, I mean we're going out to inspect them. I'm personally doing a lot of this, going out to inspect every specimen twice a year, photographing them, documenting the prevalence of the disease, the spread. I'm taking little videos to record what I'm seeing and how much growth they're putting on. We're prioritizing our most iconic trees for treatment and for care. And we're focusing really on strategies to improve the overall health. So the first thing that we've done is pulled soil samples under these trees. And we actually started this process back in 2019. And some of our stewardship teams and horticulture teams have been doing soil samples regularly on these sites for the gardens. But in 2019, seeing the decline of some of these older specimens, I began pulling samples under those beech trees themselves to see what was going on. And we actually started some pH mitigation under those trees because we were finding very low pH for a lot of them, except in the Berkshires where the pH is very high. So we're working in the Berkshires to lower the pH, and elsewhere we're applying large doses of calcitic lime twice a year to elevate the pH. So pH monitoring is very important. We're looking at the organic matter content. We are looking at all of the nutrients and micronutrients that are important to these trees. And we are currently working with a donor who could see he loves beech trees himself. He's been helping us with the pH mitigation that's been going on since 2019. And seeing us struggle with this problem, got involved and said, here's some resources for you. Bring on this arborist that we've been working with, that he also works with, and really dig into this problem. So that kind of donor support has really allowed us to work across the state and really try to impact these trees and try to impact the soil conditions and soil chemistry to give them a fighting chance. So in addition to all those micronutrients and all of the compost that we're putting down and the modifying irrigation, primarily to make sure these trees are not getting too much water, we're also experimenting with silicone. And silicone is not considered one of the most important elements for these trees, but it's being used in agriculture to help boost the immune system of plants in agriculture. So this particular arborist that we're working with has been doing a little experimenting on his own for the last few years and seeing some really good results with a combination of the techniques that we're using to boost the health of the trees, including the silicone. So this past summer, he worked his way around the state with these 81, about 75 of these 81 trees, and has applied silicone as well as some of the nutrients that the trees need. So we are very anxious for spring, not just because of the buried snow that we're in and the cold conditions that we have, but we're really anxious to see what these leaves look like and to see if we can see an improvement in them based on the work that we're doing. And then we'll really feel comfortable continuing that work and continuing to share the work that we're doing with the hope that we can help more people save their trees. Let's see, what else do I have to tell you? That's the really exciting part. In addition to that, if it doesn't work, we're working on succession plans, and we're working on that anyways across our properties because we have a lot of trees that are in the 100-year-old range. And we're looking ahead to figure out, and we're working with colleagues across the public garden world, thinking ahead to what the climate is likely to be like here in Massachusetts in 100 years. And in 100 years, it's going to be very much like South Carolina. So we are looking at trees that occur across that kind of climate range to see which ones might be suitable for our soils and our particular conditions, and trying to include some of those trees and a diverse array of trees across our public garden, on all of our properties, not just our public garden properties. We're really documenting, paying attention to documenting the work that we're doing and documenting the results so that we can share it. And we're working with our colleagues both in the arboriculture world and the public garden world to share information, to learn from what they are doing, and to get the word out there to people to kind of help this science advance. And if you want to take a screenshot of this, I know this is very small, but these are some of the sources of information that I used, and some good information, I think, for you to be able to use to dig a little bit more deeply in this. And basically, you're looking for, if you Google beech leaf disease, University of Massachusetts, it will turn up the work that they've done and some fact sheets there. The Connecticut Agricultural Experiment Station has been really at the forefront of this. Cornell University is doing some great work exploring and sharing information. And then there are some scientific papers out there on particular aspects of the work and the life of the nematode that are also really helpful. And I will leave that up for a minute, and I will pause there just to see if you have any questions or if there's anything I can tell you or share with you.
What's the average annual cost to treat a large tree? Is there you've got so many variety of things to do.
It depends on the tree, but I would say the average cost, using the arborist that we're using, doing all of the things that he's doing, which is basically coming out, doing an assessment, looking at the results of our soil tests, and actually applying the materials. So the soil drenches, the fertilizers, the lime, all the follow-up that he's doing. It's depending on the size of the tree that he's working on, it can be anywhere from $1,800 to $2,500 or $3,000
Per year.
per treatment.
Per treatment.
Yeah.
So
Yeah, so it's not inexpensive, and most of those treatments are annual. There are some things that we do repeat, like the phosphite treatments can be done more than once a year. The liming in particular can be done more than once a year, but our teams are mobilizing to take on that work themselves. So some of this work, the expense that we've expended this year, maybe a little bit less next year.
do you have any opinion on what happens when you make these applications 1 year and then you run out of money?
That is a great question. I'm really glad you asked that, because none of these measures are long-term measures, and none of them are doing anything to reduce the population of nematodes in the forest around you or in your neighbor's tree. And they're not providing long-term immunity for these trees. With the exception of the Arbitect injection, which may give us 2 years, that's not very long, actually, in the trajectory of this. So,
A follow-up question. So if I hear you right now, the best is to focus on tree health, all the basics of tree health, what we're doing within the drip line, the health of the forest soil, et cetera,
yes.
are more important.
In my
right
opinion.
now,
In
right
my
now.
opinion,
Well,
yes.
they're figuring out the rest.
Yep, that's the stance that we're taking because of our reluctance to use chemicals that we have concerns about. But not everyone feels that way. You know, there are trees that are really incredibly important to people. And so they're working with arborists who feel strongly that saving them this year with a spray is the right way to go. So we don't feel that way. And we also view the measures that we're undertaking as life support. And we know that if there's not a solution in 3 years or 5 years, we won't be able to continue to spend these resources in this way for trees that can't survive without that treatment. So we will likely have to make some difficult decisions. And we actually were prepared to do that because we did not have, without this donor, we did not have the resources to be able to do that. So I had prioritized the trees that were the most iconic. I had a second level of priority trees that we hoped to save, but we knew were not quite as critically important. And then there was a third tier of trees that were not in prime locations in the landscape, did not have an important history or designer attached to them. And though we would hate to lose them, that was the way we were viewing it. We were prepared to say no treatments for those trees. So we were very,
Triage.
very fortunate to have this donor step up. Very fortunate. But not everyone can do that.
Thank you.
Thank you. That was a great question. That's a lot of information, I know. Yes.
Hi,
Can you,
go to the microphone? Sure.
Hello, I'm Paul Popinchuk. I'm a member of the Friends of Newton Hill and the Green Streets group that is advocating for trees in the city. And my question is, and it's a personal one, it really troubled me that we have no elm trees in Elm Park. And lo and behold, we put a solar system on our house, and now we have this beautiful volunteer Dutch elm in our south side of the house. And you know, it's going to grow up and cover but I am willing to defer that, trim it and hopefully, but the point is, would that get Dutch elm disease just without inoculating it? And is that likely to happen?
It is likely to happen.
Yeah.
It is. I mean, there is resistance. There are cultivars out there now that are resistant, and there are treatments. Those injections are good treatments for elms, but they're annual or every couple of years treatments. But it potentially would get it without any sort of treatment, yes.
Yeah. Okay, thank you.
Yeah, sorry about that. But you never know. You know, in isolation, there are still big, beautiful old elm trees out there that are not being treated, that have been isolated enough from other trees that they're survivors. So it's worth hanging on to. Well, thank you all for listening.
I have a question. So the treatment that you mentioned with the phosphite, that seems to be pretty helpful and effective. And you've been doing a lot of soil testing. Have you been looking at the potential for like phosphorus leaching away from it?
So it's different from phosphates, which are more problematic.
But it's still
Uh,
phosphorus, so
It is, and we will be keeping an eye on that, but this is typically not problematic, and we're using it in quantities that should be safe. But again, it's a really great question, and these are the things that we really are keeping a close eye on, definitely. And we're careful, we have some of these trees that are overhanging ponds, so we're not using those materials. And we're being very careful about fertilizers anywhere near, within 20 to 50 feet of the pond.
My other question was with beaches, they also are commonly, many pathogens, but beach bark disease is a big one that's especially in our native forests. Is there any, in general, is there any understanding of like interactions between beach leaf disease or the nematode and interactions with these other like pathogens or?
None that I know of, but they combine overall to reduce the health of the
Allegedly.
trees and make them more susceptible. So, yeah. Yeah, so if you have a tree that has that issue, just helping it overcome that issue with the phosphite bark sprays will give you a 2-for-1 in some ways. The bark sprays alone, as I said, probably are not enough to overcome the nematode or to really help reduce the nematode. So you might have to do a combination. We are doing, with the phosphite soil drenches, we are no longer doing the bark sprays because the phosphites in the soil drenches are enough to help overcome the bark problems. So we're not doubling up on those.
Any other questions?
I've got-
Yes.
I figured
Go
Hi,
ahead,
Joanne.
AJ.
It's nice to see you. I'm sorry I couldn't be there in person this evening.
I'm sorry too, AJ.
It's great that phosphites are the answer. It means we don't have to involve contractors in the solution. Reliant and Agrifos are essentially an over-the-counter product. I had it delivered to my home from Amazon. It's an affordable solution. I'm surprised you cited it as being so costly. Amazon will bring 2.5 gallons of Agrifos or Reliant to your door for $70, and it's a 1-to-1 with water. So the beach that's next door to my house, Bartlett and Harrison McPhee have been treating their tree over the last couple of years, and it was like they were doing ArborTech and phosphite treatments, and it was costing them almost $3,000, like $2,500 for the ArborTech and the sprays. But Dr. Marrow at Connecticut Extension last year at New England ISA couldn't have been more positive about. And then also Bartlett, their treatments in Newport, they were really excited about just the phosphite treatments on the bark, which was it's going to keep them in our landscape. It's Moore State Park, which I love. They have disappeared out there, which makes me sad. And like the dogwoods and the hemlocks before them, like they've disappeared from our forests, but they're still in our landscapes. But I think we don't have to hire certified arborists. We don't need a pesticide license. Because it's labeled as a fertilizer, we can have Reliant and Agrifos delivered to our front door. It's not affordable for everybody, but for some of us, we can actually do the treatments ourselves.
Absolutely. That's a great point. And it was actually the consulting arborist that we're working with is doing a whole host of things for us. That's why the cost was so high. But
Yeah.
our hope is to be able to do a lot of that ourselves in the future and reduce the cost. It's the injections and the broad form sprays that are really pretty expensive
And
for
that's
the
what-
average homeowner. And because they're things that don't provide long-term protection and have to be repeated year over year, that's where I think the cost becomes a real issue.
And they, like you said, I mean, it was a great presentation because they weren't sustainable to begin with. Because like you said, like the thin barked trees, like it wasn't a long-term solution to begin with. And I can't wait for the spring to see what happens. Like Dr. Mara's presentation, the Connecticut Extension, he was describing just the sheer volume of nematodes. And I park underneath this European beach of my neighbors and drive or I used to drive to Roger Williams Park where there are glorious beech trees, and just the idea of like, what do I do? Like, do I need to because he was just, and then also the neighbors have a bit of a phobia of the outdoors, and me trying to convince them to spend $2,500 to try to keep this fairly glorious tree alive, when if I share with them that they're being drenched in nematodes every time, and not just them, their infant daughter is drenched in nematodes. It's not
Don't
just
tell them,
me
they'll
and
cut
my
that tree down in a
truck.
heartbeat.
Yeah, like the tree would be gone if I shared that with them. Hopefully they don't tune into tree commission meetings. So it's a heck of a pickle.
It sure is, it sure is.
Well, AJ's comment reminded me with the hemlocks, like the hemlock woolly adelgid has decimated those. But we're starting to see, I don't know if people have heard of this, that there's stands that like they're infested with hemlock woolly adelgid, but from like an ecosystem processes standpoint, it's not like devastating the forest stand. Like they're healthy. They still have a lot of leaf area, but they're infested, but they're not like
But they're
dying in the
surviving.
same way that they initially were when it first hit Massachusetts or these parts of Massachusetts.
Sometimes
That-
it's a
that
waiting
reminds
game,
me.
right? It's just a waiting game sometimes.
Yeah.
Joy, you reminded me, and Joanne touched on it, and maybe other places are doing it, but I know Holden Arboretum, which is east of Cleveland, is actively collecting and cloning beeches that are resistant to beech leaf disease. So if any, to Joanne's point, if we do see resistant ones, don't keep it to yourself, share it, because at least Holden Arboretum would like to do something with it.
I've just got one question, Joanne. When you talk about boosting the health of the tree to help it fight the nematode, just to clarify, like, you don't mean that the tree has any defenses against the nematode? It's just to get it through? Or
Actually,
does it?
some of these chemicals do help modify leaves and the cell structure and strengthen the cell structure so that it makes it more difficult for the nematodes to actually penetrate into the cells.
Okay.
So that's one of the things that we're hoping the silicon's going to do. So because it's done that, it shows that that is effective in spinach growing in agriculture. So it really does sort of activate the immune system in a way that's kind of unexpected.
Great, thank you.
Yeah.
Any other questions? This has been a wonderful talk. Thank you so much
Thank
for
you.
coming.
My pleasure,
sharing
my pleasure.
all of your knowledge. I learned a lot.
Oh, good, good. Well, when you're with the tree commission, you don't know if you're going to be helpful at all. So
We have a
thanks
diverse
for letting me
array
come
of,
in.
expertise on our commission, which is fun. Yeah. So thank you.
All right, well, I will get my laptop out of the way here and.
Cool. Well, that was wonderful. Thank you again. And we can jump into the rest of our agenda today, which acceptance of minutes. Did everybody get a chance to look at minutes from last time? I was.
Motion to accept the minutes?
Seconded?
Commissioner Alton,
Yes.
Commissioner Johnson,
Yes.
Commissioner Caraway Waterhouse,
Yes.
Commissioner Winburn,
Yes. And since we can jump around, just making sure do I still have to read public or
No.
the little, oh yeah, this year we don't do that little paragraph that I used to read in the
okay.
beginning.
Speak.
Never mind. But since we can jump around, I'll just open up to say, is there any discussion we want to continue to have about beach leaf disease? This came up as a commission item because of thinking about what we want to do here in Worcester in regards to protection. Can just put it on business for next time and just leave it as something to think about and digest what we've all just learned. But also we'll open it up to the commission if they want to have any closing points they want to make about beach leaf disease here in Worcester.
Just have one question. Are we in the business of putting out a fact sheet or a recommendation to the public about what we just heard tonight so that we have something to distribute when we go out in meetings? Should
Yeah.
we consider that?
Could be a great idea, like when going to
Well, then.
community meetings, in addition to all the other sort of information we can provide about like planting programs in Worcester, and like the lanternfly and other information, we could include that. Were you gonna say something, Robin?
I mean, I guess that's something I'd like to think about. I don't, based on, everything that Joanne has talked about and AJ's experience too, I'm not sure I'm not sure we can say more to the public than we don't know yet. And I'd be comfortable saying that, but I'm not sure I would put out like a recommendation, other than
I
something.
think sharing an up-to-date extension, like fact sheet, would be the appropriate thing to do.
Yeah,
Pick one of them.
yeah. Great point. We can put that in our pamphlets of information to bring to community meetings.
Sure.
Yeah, I'd like to see that we bring some fact sheets that we are considering next time, just
Yeah.
to look them over and see if one is, we choose one better than the other.
Yeah,
That, I guess that's a motion, I don't know
yeah.
how to put that together.
Do you like to,
Make the motion? Yeah.
or like find one that,
Oh, yeah, I'll,
We can add it to
I
our-
can just bring them.
Yeah.
Yeah.
sounds like we yeah, we
And-
know where to
and
find them
anything-
now. So that's a great idea.
share with Robin, I just put together a fact sheet for our
Uh-huh.
internal audience
Uh-huh.
that really just describes the disease and what you're looking for,
Yeah.
and not recommendations for chemicals. So that might be something to consider.
So we might not be ready for that yet, is what you're saying.
Oh, gotcha. Our guest Joanne just said, I can just repeat that she would be happy to provide a fact sheet that we can include in our information that we bring to community meetings within each of our districts. So that would be lovely.
All right, I withdraw my motion and
Oh, no,
Yeah.
no,
Oh,
no, because you may find the extensions of.
extensions. Okay, yeah, I'll bring a pile in.
Cool. That sounds good. If nothing else, on that new business item, 7B, I'll motion to file it. You can tell this is my first commission. Like always. I was doing so good last meeting, but a little sick today, so. Okay. A second motion?
Seconded.
Commissioner Alton,
Yes.
Commissioner Johnson,
Yes.
Commissioner Caraway Waterhouse,
Yes.
Commissioner Winburn,
Yes. All right, so before we jump into our old and new business, I'll just, if anybody from the public would like to participate, please go up to the speaker.
Hello, I'm still Paul Popenchuk, and I just wanted to let the commission know that the Friends of Newton Hill have submitted a new application to the Wheeler Family Trust to get some funding to help with ongoing another treating with fertilizer of the ash trees in Elm Park, I'm sorry, in Newton Square. And I would like to know what the status is of the redesign of the Newton Square Park that was going to be undertaken by the DPW, as I understood it, and also what the status of the tree trimming, because there's a lot of dead wood on the ash trees that we do have. We were grateful for the DPW taking out the 6 trees that were beyond saving, but after the first inoculation, we're hopeful that that this additional fertilization will reinforce the trees so that they can better stand off the emerald ash borer. But the I'd like to know if the department has the ability or I know they have the ability, but do they have the time and the money to trim the trees, because there's a lot of dead wood on the existing 26 ash trees in the park.
Madam Chair, we are technically unable to talk about this item because it's not on our agenda and it wasn't publicly noted to be on the agenda. I'm happy to update Paul outside of this meeting, but it's really not something that we should be discussing because it is not on the agenda. I don't mean to be a stickler, and I'm not trying to get away from it. It's just, if we're going to be transparent and we're going to do this the right way, then we should stick to that side of it. So, Paul, no, I apologize, but, so, yep.
Could it technically qualify under 6A? Commissioner, to set goals for the commission? And we could talk about,
I think you're pushing it.
okay, just learning here.
Would
I can
the,
push.
Point of information, so when something like that comes up, is there a way to push it to the next meeting?
Yep.
So that it's
Yeah,
efficient?
so-
That would be the way to go
So
about
the
it?
commission right now can vote to have an update placed on the next meeting agenda. The problem with that, Commissioner, is that what happens is that you're waiting a month, right? Because the next meeting is in a month, which is fine, we can do that. It's just, so when something like that comes up, what has to happen is that ideally, you're really not hearing it because it's not a part of the agenda. But you can make a motion at the end to ask to have that on to the next meeting, is usually what I would do. Or it would just be an item, like anybody else. If you want to put something on the agenda, you ask for it within the time frame that states on here, 2 business days, so I have enough, or 3 business days, so I have enough time to be able to put it on and post it.
And so, but your intermediate solution is you can just put your other hat on and answer those questions after the meeting?
Correct. I can give him an update after the meeting right now,
All
so,
right, yeah, perfect.
as long as he's willing to stay.
All right, I'm just learning.
Yeah, so.
would the
Just good to
gentleman,
know for anybody who comes to one of our meetings, if your answer doesn't get answered during the meeting, it can be off after the meeting. Part of why I was thinking 6A is, or maybe even 6C, which is plans for future meetings, is since Newton Hill is a topic of discussion in future meetings in regards to the group at UMass Amherst in landscape architecture that the city has been partnering with to do a redesign. So I'm not sure if I can speak to it in that context. Or if we have updates on which of our future meetings we might expect those folks to be coming.
No, I don't have we really shouldn't be, because it's got to be a little bit more specific about it. Trying to be general gets us in trouble.
Okay.
And so I would say let's have it on the agenda for the next meeting. And
Okay.
I can give you an update on what's going on that.
will the gentleman be satisfied with an answer next month? Sure. Okay, thank you.
On that point, is there anyone else from the public who would like to speak? There's no commissioner report this week or this month. In old business, I mentioned a couple points there. One is setting goals for the commission, and I would motion to keep that in old business.
Seconded.
And I also mentioned, we have 3 more old business items to discuss, and since I've come to realize I can go out of order, I'm gonna go out of order.
Well, we need to do, we
have
need to
to
do
vote.
a roll call vote on the first item, which is A.
Oh, gotcha. Yeah, forgot that. I'm slipping up. Okay,
Okay,
roll
where-
call.
Where are we going now?
You're doing old business for
A?
6A.
Okay.
You got a first with Joy, a second with Robin.
Commissioner Alton,
Yes.
Commissioner Johnson,
Yes.
Commissioner Caraway Waterhouse,
Yes.
Commissioner Winburn.
Yes.
So, Madam Chair, just as for the record, ideally, we follow the agenda. The only time that I choose to try to not follow the agenda is when we have a wonderful individual who's trying to give a presentation so that they don't need to stay for
I
as
got-
long as the rest of us
Yeah,
are staying.
It went to my head
Now-
today, so.
Now, she's more than welcome to stay, but I didn't want to make that have to happen since she was the last item on the agenda. So,
I see. So I can't like just bounce.
so
it.
ideally, no, but if you choose to, for a reason,
I
and the
have to
commission
agree.
agrees, then yes, we can. But in general, bopping around becomes problematic for
It too, never
for us
did
to
it
be able to
today.
do everything. Thank you.
All right.
You're welcome.
Thank you again so much. Okay, no bouncing around. So on to agenda number 6B. So review of city ordinances. I unfortunately missed our meeting last month, and I haven't had a chance to see what was discussed.
We
but in-
deferred. We
What?
deferred. We deferred until you came back.
Okay, so, which is why I was kind of thinking about, I would suggest that we talk about it at our next meeting. See, this is why I wanted to go to C, because I can't make our next meeting in March. And putting it off till April seems unfortunate. But we could also talk about it tonight if people feel like prepared. I also realize it's getting on the later side. Do people want to talk about the tree ordinance table that was in our agenda from last month tonight or next meeting?
I can't speak to the table. I need to be refreshed on what that looks like, but I
Yeah.
do have tree ordinance related questions
All right.
for you guys that will help me do more research.
Do you know the table that I'm referencing that was in
I can't remember.
our, okay.
Yeah.
The questions?
Yeah, but hit us with your questions.
Okay.
Yeah.
I'm researching, just other towns and cities. I'm looking at how they define significant trees. And I'm just coming across just a lot of variation in how people define a significant tree. For instance, and I'm talking about for the purposes of creating some type of ordinance around significant trees on private property, because I feel like we already have public tree protections. So the city of Boston says that significant trees are anything over 8 inches diameter, breast height. Cambridge is anything over 6 inches. Newton is anything over 8 inches. Hartford, Connecticut is anything over 13 inches. These all seem kind of small to me, kind of on the small side. Springfield, Mass, a significant tree is 36 inches DBH, which is quite large. And AJ, I wanted to see if you could clarify Providence, Rhode Island.
It's 32.
Is it DBH?
It is. Or at
It
least
is.
last time I checked, it was 32.
That's correct, that's what I found. I just didn't find any language about, I assumed it was DBH, but since it didn't specify, I wanted to check with you. And I wanted to ask anyone from Forestry, what is or anybody else on the commission, Is there a reason why some of these towns have such small measurements for their significant trees?
I would guess that they're just real optimistic about saving canopy. They're aggressive about preserving trees on private property. I would, Providence, there was always, I'm sure they're still talking about it today, about reducing the size from 32, because that's try to get in the screen, that's a large tree. 32 is a very large tree. And I was always for reducing the size, but I'm not really for creating policies that aren't enforceable. So because it's a slippery slope, then who cares about them? Is sort of the attitude eventually. So I'm for reducing the size as long as there's capacity within the forestry division or planning or wherever the responsibility lies to actually enforce the policy. So I would love to see Worcester have policies about first of all, around preserving trees before construction begins, not clearing a lot before any permits for development begins, but then preserving trees once permits begin, along the edges of parcels, but even in the middle. And 32 inches is again big, but the way it's written in Providence, people would have to redesign buildings. I have a button right here, save the Fennel Hall oak. And Providence College had to redesign their nursing school, and they told me how expensive redesigning the nursing school was to preserve that oak tree. And it was a big deal for them, and it was a big deal that it happened. And it wasn't just me being the city arborist that made it happen. It was students and professors getting involved, and I think God had a hand in it. And so sorry, I'm getting long-winded at this point, but I do think 6 inches is a little dramatic, but
That's how I felt. I agree with you. I don't want to, enforcement is an issue. And I also don't want to make it, I don't want to impede homeowners from just being able to do what they need to do on their property. And yet I want to see if we can find some mutually agreeable, measurement that people would agree is meets the definition of a significant tree.
right. How can you actually defend 6-inch tree being a significant tree? And as someone who had to enforce it, even a 32-inch tree, some of the most anxious moments I had as a city forester was when I was going to someone's personal property to tell them what they could not do on that personal property. And it wasn't the moments when I was going to hopefully have a civil conversation about construction plans and their planned project, but when a commercial arboriculture company was up in the tree and I'm telling them to come down, and if that's happening, a homeowner is committed to thousands of dollars and they didn't come to this decision easily. So and then tell them tree guys they got to come out of a tree and they don't know who I am, and so tensions are raised. And so it's not an easy policy to enforce. So you want the tree to actually have some significance if you're going to be enforcing it, not be 6 inches.
I'd like to add a little bit. We're talking about DBH, but that's not everything that goes into what usually makes a tree significant. There's species value.
That's true.
Age and legacy. Is it very old? Historical and cultural importance. And development context. Is the property being subdivided? Is a building permit requested? Things like that. So I think significant has more to do with some of the other things, and that DBH marker is what opens up the field. From what I see on averages, 24 to 36 inches DBH is about the average cities and towns use as a significant tree threshold. But we have some that are much smaller. But I think that's to try to bring in the other aspects of what makes a tree significant.
I agree.
And just its sheer size, no.
Well, and its sheer size at its.
At
this
some
ar-
point,
1.3 meters.
they automatically become.
Of height. Like, trees grow and have different growth. So I think the reason why it's like on the smaller end is that's like for most species, like when they've reached the canopy, they've gotten, or reaching the top, like as high as they're gonna get and like get lots of sunlight. But that varies a lot by species.
Mhm.
And then also thinking with all of these different aspects of the ordinances that we're thinking about updating, it's like what makes the most sense for a city like Worcester. So like, thank you for sharing those ranges, which are very large, but it kind of makes sense, right? In a highly urbanized city like Boston or Cambridge, you don't have huge swaths of forested area as well. Like in a city like Worcester, we have parts of our city that are very urban and others that are like, you're not out of Worcester and you feel like you're in Western Mass already. But like, so we have to kind of think about like, yeah, what would make it, what would be the right, and maybe it's not a size at a 1.3 meter height on a tree. Maybe it's something else. The other thing too is heritage tree. That's what I saw language a lot as well.
I
and
saw legacy, Hartford uses legacy trees,
Yeah.
which incorporates not just DBH, but, you know, ecological value, historical attachment, aesthetic value, and other qualities.
Well, I'm not an arborist, so I'm not so sure that DBH is always going to be the governing thing, but it does seem to be very important when you're thinking in terms of planning, handling, and dealing with putting them in the ground.
You're right, because like
but-
a glorious dogwood is 10 inches in diameter. And so,
Yeah, so there's different categories of trees and,
Yeah.
yeah.
Yeah, so it's a lot more complicated.
So what I would like to ask my fellow commissioners is that, you know, we'll be thinking about how we want to define a significant tree or a legacy tree or a heritage tree, you know, for language for a possible ordinance. So I'd like you guys to help me think about, you know, these questions and think about the language. And yeah, I tried to do a lot of comparisons with other cities that were the same size as Worcester, you know, about 200,000 people, and a lot of our sister cities don't have significant tree ordinances at all. And I'm wondering if that's like it's probably a staffing issue, like a lot of mid-sized cities. We have some staff, not enough staff, you know, larger cities have more
It's a
resources.
complicated question, so it's going to get pushed aside.
Yeah. Thank you, that's all I wanted to, and thank you all for sharing.
Yeah, that was a great question. Is there any other questions that commissioners want to bring up in regards to tree ordinances? I would, so apologies for not making our last meeting. I was real excited about it and then suddenly had to not make it. But I had put in the agenda notes for that meeting, and perhaps I'll put it on the item for next meeting to have it in the notes so you all have it. But I put together some tables, and it's also in the Google Doc, notes_tree ordinances. So I cleaned up that document quite a bit, and it includes overarching themes that we need to be thinking about as we think about updating ordinances. And then I put together two tables. One is specific to tree ordinances, and all of the major themes, like the one you just pointed out, Robin, is like the first one, like significant tree language. That's an issue.
I saw that
What is
table.
our current language in our ordinance in regards to that issue? And what are ideas for changing it? And so this table kind of breaks that out for all of the topics. And I would like at our this meeting, next meeting, we can decide that in a moment, but the next step that I see is to kind of rank these topics so that we kind of tackle them one by one throughout our meetings that we have this spring. So like, there's also a first column of like ranking the priority of the item, so that we can start thinking about like, what are the things that we think we want to see in an ordinance update for the city of Worcester. So one question is one task is prioritizing the order in which we start tackling them, because we had discussed at our December meeting that it's a lot to try and tackle in one meeting. So let's like organize it. So this is a merging of 6B and 6C is deciding what we want to do with our meetings moving forward. But before even that, also like, is there something missing from the table, right? We've spent a lot of time in the last year, I think, kind of compiling a lot of research, going through it, looking at ordinances that other cities have had, and these are the ones that I found us talking about the most, but maybe there's something missing. So yeah, I don't want to like assign. How are people feeling? Do we want to dig into some topics tonight, or give ourselves some homework between now and our next meeting, or just tackle it at our next meeting? 3 choices. I am biased. I am recovering from a cold, so I'm leaning towards the second and third option. But
Yeah, and
One
Yeah.
additional question. I can peek over there and see the grid, and I see that some of them are marked. How many items do you have that are in question and that you're looking for some discussion on?
oh, I think we should discuss all of these. So I wrote,
Each and every?
yeah,
Not
well,
just the ones you have grid.
so
that's
to your
what the
point.
ranking is for, correct? Like, we'll rank them and then discuss them in order.
Yeah.
And did we not have a discussion about colors? Did we talk about ranking by color? Didn't we assign ourselves colors? Each person would have a color that they used for their ranking.
We picked a color.
Yes, you did.
And does anybody have
I
that list?
did not remember that. Oh, like color coding or edits to
Yes.
the actual tree ordinance draft, right?
Oh,
Or,
okay, that's not, so that's, we're not ranking on your table.
I would just put your initials, because I like
Okay,
totally
fine.
forgot we did that in December.
Yeah, I think initials are fine.
Initials are fine.
Okay.
Maybe thought it was like a half
And
joke.
can we, through the chair, can we recirculate that
Yeah.
particular document so
I
that we
also
all
could-
have the same document?
Yeah, so it is in
It is in the docs.
meeting notes from January, or agenda notes for January. But I can also email each commissioner, like, the link to the Google Doc if that's easier to update. I can also read it
this is
off
the link.
now.
Okay,
So
is this it right here?
1,
Notes on the
2,
tree ordinance?
4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9. There's 10 issues that I listed.
All right, so I'm here, all right.
Yeah.
Yeah, I read it today. I don't need a
Okay. You have
a recap.
yeah, but yeah, there's 10 issues, and then within each
I can't
issue,
find
I
it.
made little sub issues because they're brought up in different ways.
AJ needs some help finding it.
What was that, AJ?
Surprisingly, I can't find it.
Yeah, no, I hear you.
I'm in the Google Doc or Google Drive. I
I'll
feel like
just
I'm real close.
I'll just email you.
Thank you.
And just a refresher, because this is like a big task we're tackling, trying to update the ordinance. When was the last time it was updated? A while ago.
2008.
Yeah, that was a pretty long time. I feel like it's not that long ago, but then it's a pretty long time ago. So just a reminder, in our tree ordinance folder on Google Doc, we have a folder for tree species lists, which we've been making a lot of progress on, which is exciting. Thank you to Robin and AJ for all your work on those. There's peer-reviewed literature, news articles about ordinances, existing ordinances, and then a folder for notes and drafts. And then under notes and drafts is where this table lives, in the notes document. the draft tree ordinance document, that is our current ordinance. And my goal with that document is for us to think, like, to never touch it without, like, tracked edits that your name is attached to, with the goal of translating what changes we want to see and how that'll show up in an actual ordinance, and start kind of keeping that in mind. And so when I put this table together, I was going through a lot of the ordinances that everybody had researched and put in there, and was just kind of walking through like what things a lot of ordinances had, or things that I thought were really good idea that like we didn't have. Like we don't, it's kind of towards the bottom of the table, so it's a bit prioritized how I would rank it in order of discussion. My bias is there. But like in the, well, actually no, because enforcement is the last one. I mean, that's very important, as AJ's pointed out. But there's also like definitions is towards the end, to your point. Like it would be really good to have a section right up front that's just like, this is what we mean when we say this, and like a whole slew of definitions. So I put in a lot of language about examples of those that are in other ordinances that we should have in ours. But yeah, does that sound like a good plan between now and our next meeting? To go into the Google Doc and put like a ranking, like there's 10 topics, and just like rank. Like you can put a note in the ranking, like put your initials, and then after it be like number 1 topic, number 2 topic, get rid of this topic, this, and add anything to it as well that you're thinking for ideas for change. I did pull out what our current, so one thing is like tree fund. That's an idea that I know a lot of folks have mentioned, and different community groups have mentioned the importance of, we need to have a tree fund. And currently the only funding is replacement costs for trees that come down. Not other funds are available. Do we want to generate a fund that goes beyond replacement costs that could help fund canopy expansion and proposed discounts? What would that look like? And see notes below on examples from other cities. So that's a place in the bottom after this table to kind of post, if you have significant like ideas, to keep them out of the table and put them at the end. And the other thing to note of this, to review, is table 2. So Michelle Smith came in from planning in March of last year and gave a really fabulous presentation. I went through her PowerPoints to just make sure I didn't miss anything when I was putting this table together, but it was just pulling in the overlaps with planning, regulations, and trees. And in this regard, this would be more like, what suggestions do we want to be making to planning as they're thinking about subdivision regulations as one issue, and zoning ordinance as the second main issue in that table. And again, I put in what's like currently being done. I haven't filled out that table with ideas for change. But that's something that, yeah, we can start tackling and thinking about. Yeah. Do what, folks want to talk more about ordinances tonight, or at a future meeting? Yay, that's my vote too. But I'm excited to tackle this. So homework sounds good. We're on board with homework for next time. Fill out the ranking, add any issues, and add any like ideas for changes, and we'll start tackling those at our next meeting. So if there's no more discussion of city ordinances, I will motion to keep that in old business, because we will talk about it next time. I need a second.
Second.
Okay.
Commissioner Elton,
Yes.
Commissioner Johnson,
Yes.
Commissioner Caraway Waterhouse,
Yes.
Commissioner Winburn.
Yes. All right. Next on the agenda is to review and plan our 2026 meetings. So upcoming meetings is March 11th, April 8th, May 6th, June 3rd. mentioned, I'm pretty sure I can't make a March 11th still.
Oh, so then should we still have that last business and old business for next month then? Because you're not gonna be here and we're not gonna be able to.
I know, this is a good point, but you can always skip over it if,
You just,
do people
you would
wanna?
just vote to keep it in old business,
Yeah,
that's all. Otherwise, it goes off the agenda and then it has to go back on the agenda, so you're
Yeah.
better off keeping it there so we don't lose track of it.
yeah. But, yeah, I thought it would be helpful, that way we don't have to like go by, I mean, if things come up in the month that you wanna add on the agenda, awesome. But it's also helpful to just like plan out our meetings, so,
That's also a reminder to the rest of us that in order to make a quorum, we have to make sure we make the meeting. AJ, is that next month still good for you?
It is.
that's
Yeah.
true, cause one down. All right, so next meeting, I won't be here, but we'll have at least 3 commissioners, so we'll have quorum. What do y'all wanna talk about in my absence?
Hmm.
And also, Rob, you tend to have a lot of agenda items in the springtime. Will you be planning to have like April, May agenda items, things that will take up significant amounts of times in meetings that we should plan for?
More as we sort of move into April and May.
Yeah. That's been the case in past years, so we'll probably want to keep room in May to, in April to talk about like Arbor Day events and things like that.
I'm sorry, so when you said that are we deciding tonight when the September and October dates are for 2026?
No,
Okay.
my request to the commission is to plan out what we want to talk about at our next 4 meetings. But
Not prepared.
not
Not-
prepared.
Yeah, I would
Okay.
say that that's overly ambitious, at
Cool.
least for me to be able to, up with.
Well, April 8th, we'll talk about ordinances again when I'm here. And then we'll have 2 more meetings to talk about ordinances. So I'll keep that in mind as I think about how we should tackle this. All right, so I would motion to file that agenda item.
seconded.
Commissioner Elton,
Yes.
Commissioner Johnson,
Yes.
Commissioner Caraway Waterhouse,
Yes.
Commissioner Winburn,
Yes. Last and old business is Pleasant Street discussion, which was an agenda item that you added.
I brought it up
And it
last.
was brought up last
Brought it up
time.
last meeting, and it appears there's not much interest in taking it on. So I leave it up to my fellow commissioners. It's in the record, and it's a document that exists. There's no
Do-
need to go over it again.
Other commissioners want to discuss the Pleasant Street development or file that item?
I apologize, can you remind me?
I'll remind you a little bit about it.
Yeah,
Because Pleasant Street is being redeveloped, and because there will be relocations of things like guardrails, things will be moved around, certain trees have to be removed and so on. Root zone protection would be in place for curbing movement, all of those sort of issues. I put together a document that listed the items and things along that street, and the counselor from that district went over that stuff with me because they've shown an interest in the subject. So I brought it up, but it appears that's not the scope of this commission right now. So I don't know where to go with it. Yeah, I mean, can we do anything with it? Should we be part of the review process? We don't really have, from what I can see, a formal function of review or input or anything. But I hate to get to where the things are starting to come down, and then we get hit with, oh, this tree's coming down, this thing's moving, this thing's over there, what's happened? Why wasn't anybody on top of this? That's why I brought it up. But guess it's not the place for it. That was that was my, feeling when I left last week. So we could, leave it to you whether you want to move it forward, take it off the table, or put it on. But I'm not giving any recommendation. And I'm
I
gone.
thought we were told that there was no funding for the project and no timeline for the project.
You mean
Is that
Pleasant
not the
Street?
case?
Uh,
Yeah.
Pleasant Street passed the 25% funding threshold for planning and was moved on to the 75% funding phase that the state has when they go ahead and do that. So unless I missed something, they plan to do the Pleasant Street upgrade is still in place. But it's being done by I think this one is being done by the state. It's messy. I just thought that, Tree Commission would have some input into something that alters the tree landscape that much. But I believe right now we're focused on the parks and street trees.
So
Is that
it
true?
because, is Pleasant Street a state road? Is that the deal?
It's 122, I believe.
Pleasant Street is a state road from Tatnick Square up into Paxton.
Yeah. And I think the city is looking at the other part, Highland Street, up to where it meets in a year later. So this will be coming up over and over again as we redo these streets and redo these areas. And all I wanted to know is, are we looking at those trees or are we not? That's all. And I got the feeling when we left that meeting that we're not looking at those trees. Are we? Aren't we?
I remember this
Well-
conversation.
Well, does it matter if we're looking at them or not? My experience in Rhode Island is we can look at the trees all day long and the state does what they want.
We have no input. So that was one of the basics. So I'm leaving it up to the other commissioners. If you want to move to take this off the table and get rid of this issue, let's do it. And I'll know what the boundaries are. I'm learning what we're focused on and what we're not focused on. If we're not focused on what happens when a street gets redone, then we're not, or we are. And if we are, what do? We can go, so we don't have direct input. We can write letters. We could do some informal things that go, even though they're going to ignore us. Because I've found that when people ignore you and you keep coming, you eventually make some movement or some change. So it
Well,
starts with that kind of thing. So this is all I'm saying. I'm leaving it up to you guys because I got the overwhelming feeling that we just wanted to focus on the parks and street trees.
So,
I've got an idea.
Yeah.
I got a buddy who works for public relations for MDOT. We could do 2 birds with 1 stone. We could add to the agenda for the next meeting and keep this on the agenda for the next meeting. I'll see if I can wrangle Dan Rassicott to come to the Tree Commission meeting next month, and we can see if he can speak to the trees for this construction project. What do we think?
Turn that into a motion through the chair.
Yeah, second that motion, adding items to our new business for March 11th meeting.
We're keeping this one,
Okay, cool.
and this one,
I'm very satisfied.
I'm very sad I'm missing our next meeting.
I have something to add after we vote too.
Madam Chair, so, couple of things, right? So number one, in any street project in the city of Worcester, if there's a public shade tree, which is within the right-of-way that is under our responsibility, then yes, we review those. If the tree is on private property, it's outside of our control, and the private property owner and the city or MassDOT make those determinations. So that's one. Two, Mass Highway does have a lot more leniency when it comes to, their side of it under Mass General Law. And it does state that side of it, so they have a lot more leniency in regards to what they're allowed to do and what they can do and what they need approval for and what they don't. So, if we're talking about putting in walls and going outside of the right of way and then affecting, a tree or something like that, it's outside of our world. I'll give you a good example. So Pleasant Street, there were a number of trees that were dead as a doornail. And National Grid went in and removed a whole bunch of trees, right? They were on private property. We had nothing to do with it. That was between the whole property owner and National Grid. In that same world, there were a couple that were within our jurisdiction. And so those, we went in and we reviewed them with National Grid and either approved them or required a tree hearing or whatever we decided to do for those trees. So we are limited in what we can do because we are limited by what the right-of-way is. So that's the defining factor on that end of it. The right-of-way isn't that large there, right? So what you really see there is pretty much there's a little bit here and there. But we're not going to have that tree that's 20 feet beyond a sidewalk or in an area where they want to make a change. We're not going to see that. We're not going to, that's not something on our end of it that we do. But we do that administratively. So we would work with MassDOT, we would work with Transportation and Mobility on the design to review that stuff before it gets to. So 25% is really not that big of a deal right now because there can be lots of changes at 25%. I mean, lots of changes. I've seen things go from one way to a completely opposite design. So we wouldn't really look at that until they're getting more towards that 60, 70% where they're really feeling confident that a tree within the right-of-way is going to be affected. I don't have a problem on your end if that's, if you want to speak about that as a resident, that's one thing. But again, we're not doing that as part of private property in that world. So the other piece to that is that your best bet is if you have concerns outside of the tree component, then those really should be directed to MassDOT and Transportation and Mobility because they're the ones that will be guiding that design project. And so your comments should be put forth in their portal or in their world so that it's on record in that location. And then the other thing is that we will need to know what you want to do with that item, and then if Commissioner Elton's going to include this other item, we need to know that. So we'll need to get the wording right here as well on those two items. So.
Okay. Before moving on to those two items, just want to say that when you say we, that's the city, right? You're the Parks and Rec, the ordinance as it currently stands, you only right away. That's all you're dealing with. But as a commission, our goal is to look at the whole forest and to think about things like tree ordinances and changing.
One of the things that we need to look at, and I have that on my list to do, is to look at what that definition means and what the commission's role is on there, because you may not have that there. That may be, private property may be a planning board item or a zoning board item and not a public urban forestry item.
What I was going to say is, as a commission, as it's currently written for this commission, our goal is to look at the entire urban forest of Worcester, which includes public and private land. And we have no regulatory teeth, right? We're not we have no teeth. So our only teeth is to bring things up. So I think it's important to bring up items and to be aware of it. And it informs the sort of recommendations that we would make into an ordinance of should this be in an ordinance for a city like Worcester to learn more about the issues going on in the city?
Understood. but at the same time, I'll do a little bit of legwork on that in the next couple days and ship something back out to you that sort of defines that a little bit better. Just to make sure that the direction that we're going is that direction. As individuals, you can go to planning board or you can go to zoning, or depending on what that is, right? You can go there for those particular purposes. I just want to make sure that what we're doing is the direction it needs to go. And I don't want to start making recommendations that don't go anywhere, or if you want, you can make that recommendation to planning or zoning and work through the proper procedures to get those kinds of things done. So, but I'll
Makes sense.
I'll
And we
look at it though, and
Appreciate you.
I'll get that back to everybody so that we
Yeah.
know what that is.
Yeah, appreciate you doing that. Just also want to encourage commissioners to continue to share issues going on in your district, because we all learn from them.
Yeah, and
And-
that's, sharing those is
Yeah.
great. It's just whether or not we can
Do
act on
anything. Yeah.
something or do something.
Currently, the way the ordinance is written,
correct.
you cannot act, like, as you just clearly stated,
Yep. So-
how everything works.
And I
But
would
it-
like to say that
Currently,
just
yeah.
because we don't or can't act on something at the moment, it's not lack of interest necessarily. And that it might fall under, we have this part of our agenda called setting goals for the commission.
Yeah, that would.
And that would be like something that we could talk about there, like, do we want to move in these directions? It's definitely not lack of interest.
Okay, I'm sorry, I might have been a bit harsh.
And we might miss these projects. Members of the public have brought up projects that they're concerned about that we, at the moment, can't do anything about. But maybe in the future, we can tackle those
Yeah.
those types of issues. We're still a new commission. We're still forming what we.
Yeah.
It's more, so much I don't know.
It's such a
it's
huge
very
city. We
difficult.
all hang out in our districts, right, where we live. So it's like good to know about the issues that are happening throughout the city. So thank you for bringing it to the commission. And I will motion that we file that, because I have another motion for a new business item. So I motion that we file that agenda item,
6D.
6D.
Go ahead.
We get in a second?
Oh, we need a second.
Second.
Oh.
Commissioner Elton,
Yes.
Commissioner Johnson,
Yes.
Commissioner Caraway Waterhouse,
Yes.
Commissioner Winburn.
Yes.
So
And
now,
now I have a motion. Sorry, I was giving a moment of silence. Just a little slow today. A motion to add to new business for our March 11th meeting. AJ, do you want to word this one, or shall I take a stab?
You take a stab.
Okay. Request of Commissioner AJ Elton for discussion with representative from MassDOT. I forgot their name.
Danny Rassicat.
Yeah. And then we need a second for that.
I'll second.
Commissioner Elton,
Yes.
Commissioner Johnson,
Yes.
Commissioner Caraway Waterhouse,
Yes.
Commissioner Winburn.
Yes. And at this point, we've taken care of old business, right? Or did I miss any?
nope, we're good.
Great. On to new business. We already tackled 7B and filed that one. So our last item of, last item of business is an update on our tree list, which our wonderful commissioners, Robin and AJ, have been tackling. Any updates to share? I know we have a final list that Robin put together, and that AJ, you've been working on like beautifying it.
I can't take the credit. Stephanie's been working on it, and if she hadn't got on a plane for Iceland, it would be completed. But she got on a plane for Iceland, and she wasn't able to get all the imagery done. And so by March 11th, I will have a completed list to share, and it won't say Quahog, Rhode Island on it anymore. It'll say Worcester, and then it can be manipulated however the city would like to have it.
Awesome. Well, thank you for that update. If there's nothing further to discuss on that, I motion to put that in old business because it sounds like we will probably talk about it next time with an updated list.
Seconded.
Commissioner Elton,
Yes.
Commissioner Johnson,
Yes.
Commissioner Caraway Waterhouse,
Yes.
Commissioner Winburn.
Yes. And that's it for our new business. Is there anything further to discuss? Otherwise, I would suggest meeting adjourn, and I'll get my little powerful gavel.
We need to do a roll call on the.
But we have
adjournment.
to do a roll call
Yep.
first. All right.
I need a second.
Yep.
On the agenda. Commissioner Elton,
Yes.
Commissioner Johnson,
Yes.
Commissioner Caraway Waterhouse,
Yes.
Commissioner Winburn.
Yes.